So they asked 500 CEOs, or would you, because due to AI, are you going to increase your headcount, decrease your headcount, or keep it the same? Only 10% said decrease their headcount. Only 10 out of 100, right? It was, 45, I think, was increase and 55 was keep the same. Again, this narrative that some of the heads of the AI companies are pushing in terms of these massive job disruptions. I don't know if they're doing it to pump, their stock or their IPO. Again, I'm struggling to see any real world examples where that has actually, come about. We've tried it to, again, I'm in the fast fashion space. I launch 1,500 SKUs a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It's a huge effort. I've got a PIM with 5, 6 years worth of detailed product data with pictures and everything else. Should be plenty of data to train an AI in terms of, okay, the next new item that comes in that they can, it can get 70, 80% of it done, but it can't do it all. And by
Yeah.
the time then I put a human to review everything it's done and fill in the gaps that it hasn't done, I'm really at the same spot. Maybe I get a 10 or 20% productivity improvement, but not enough to be able to, right? I'm not reducing headcount. Maybe they can do a few more products. And by the time I pay for the AI, I'm in the hole.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I also run an agency, Did It, as well as a brand, Truth Nutrition, that I bought so that I could run every marketing experiment my clients wouldn't let me run. So in addition to that, there's a bunch of stuff, some nonprofits and some things in my incubator, many of which intersect with AI, either because they're helping with AI visibility, like Visible One, or they're being built with AI, which is coding things much more quickly than we've ever been able to do before. Super excited to be chatting with David Cost today, who's at Rainbow Apparel as Chief Digital Officer. And so let's start with the recent speaking engagement you had at Lead Summit, where you mentioned that AI for teams is all the rage, but there are risks of use in using AI in a team environment with data leakage and security and such. And perhaps there are other risks you covered in your talk that I didn't catch.
So I think there were a couple points that seemed to resonate with that audience. I think the first is I use the analogy of the spreadsheet and the way the spreadsheet came into the world and how I think that is similar to what's happening with AI, right? In the early days of personal computing, when the spreadsheet was invented, it started, there'd be an ambitious person in the organization that would get the first PC. They would inevitably get the spreadsheet software. They'd start to build spreadsheets. As they got more and more sophisticated, they'd start to try to share them with other people. And the bigger that sharing group got and the more coordination you needed to do across multiple people, they would start to break, right? Because the spreadsheet was a personal productivity tool. It wasn't really meant to be an enterprise tool. And if you look at what's happening with AI now, we've got people all over organizations either using free or $20 a month, Chatter Cloud accounts. And they're doing lots of personal experimentation, right? They're building real pieces of software that help them do their job. And then as other people in the organization learn about it, they're looking for ways to replicate and push that through. And those individual tools start to break. Um, excuse me,
Bless you.
as you try to do more coordinated work. So that's how I kind of think what we learned and saw in the evolution of spreadsheets. We're at the very early stages of AI, and AI is following a similar trajectory. Individuals will be able to experiment and prototype, but as those prototypes need to hit production, you're going to need more IT resources to make that happen.
Right. Yeah, that's a great analogy. I also thought back as I was preparing for this of sort of the early days of data breaches, right, as it related to PII. And there was sort of a wave that continued somewhat to this day, but it's tapered off dramatically. But in the early days of sort of centralized databases with PII, including credit card information before there was a PCI compliance
Right.
methodology, right? There would be these data breaches, which might include, PII that included social security numbers, and then sometimes even PII that included credit card numbers. And so now you've got, all these individuals within companies sharing documents like Google Sheets and Microsoft Sheets, right? But beyond that, they're using AI to do analysis, right? And
Right.
some of the platforms that they're using for AI purposes don't necessarily compartmentalize that data. So do you think that there's going to be some sort of equally big data breach of some sort that will become the aha moment, the wake up moment where a company has to pay millions of dollars in retribution, or there's a class action, or something happens that sort of wakes up the entire ecosystem and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. It is great. It's super powerful. It's a force multiplier for an individual, but we got to put guardrails in place. Do you think there's going to be sort of something big that has to hit
Well,
to change things?
I think we may already be here, and
Okay.
let me tell you why.
All right.
So I think people are under the false impression that when they pay for Chat or Claude for $20 a month, that they're on something that is private,
Right.
and they are not. And the courts are now, the technology moved faster than the courts do, but the courts always eventually catch up,
Yeah.
right? And there was a famous case a couple months ago where a CEO of a financial firm was sued by the SEC for some matter. His lawyers had produced a bunch of stuff to kind of get him ready for court. He didn't understand it, brought it home, plugged it into his $20 chat account. And when the government found out, they said, okay, you've just broken attorney-client privilege. We can go to OpenAI and subpoena that information. They were able to not only get everything he entered, they were able to get all of his attorney's work product because he had done that. So, look, I mean, when I said in that room that don't say anything, don't enter anything into that $20 account that you wouldn't be comfortable having discoverable in court, that landed like a pound of bricks in that room. I think people are just not aware. I mean, I'll give you another example. Let's say you're a product company and you take a chemical formulation or a recipe or something. The minute you put it into that $20 account, you've now just destroyed any ability to get copyright or patent protection on it because it's now public. And people really just are not aware. So I think corporations are going to quickly have to put in place, they're going to have to start to block those for those $20 accounts, and they're going to have to put in some kind of an enterprise service that is locked down and private, to protect the organization from what people are going to just unknowingly, cause problems.
I can't think of a better slide in a pitch deck for Claude, for ChatGPT and Claude as to the enterprise pitch deck, where they're sort of saying, here's the reason you have to sign up for the, all 2,300 of your employees, right? Because you don't want to handcuff them by not giving them access to the
Correct.
power of AI, but at the same time, you want to do it in a way that you protect your intellectual property and your legal rights on a go forward basis. So if they didn't add that slide yet, they should definitely add that slide when they watch or hear us chatting. There's sort of a resurfacing of this sort of, there was a digital transformation wave, that started quite a few years ago, and sort of everybody was digitizing businesses. And it's sort of back in a new way. It's sort of digital transformation with the AI layer on top of it. So of course you've still got lots of companies that are, still keeping track of phone calls on yellow post-it notes near the
Mhm.
sales guy's desk. So they're going to leapfrog digital transformation all completely and land on sort of the AI version of digital transformation. So how would you define that? Because it's such a broad term. And I'm curious how you think about digital transformation in the age of AI.
I mean, look, like I think over the course of my career, we started with kind of personal computing, right? Which really just upended things. This concept that you could put a computer on somebody's desk and it didn't just have to be attached to the mainframe was revolutionary, right? So then as we started to push power all the way down to the individual, right? It took us 20 years to kind of absorb, figure out how to optimize that, and really take it to its fullest. Then we get the internet, right? And now the internet's going to start to interconnect everything, right? And so now, how do you absorb that wave? Out of the internet, we got digital commerce. Um, I'd say almost, then we get, mobile phones or mobile computing, right? That iPhone so changed the world. And to me, so at Rainbow, we sell kind of affordable clothing to people in the lower half of the income spectrum. And the mobile phone is the great technological equalizer. So
Hmm.
prior to the mobile phone, computing was relatively expensive, right? It was in the upper income or the upper, middle income sections, right? To be able to afford a computer or a laptop, you had to have some real income. When the mobile phone comes along and as it rolled along, we literally put computers and internet connected devices in the hands of almost every person in this country. It really leveled the playing field, and completely changed what you can and can't do when everybody has truly universal access. So I think that was, as we progressed down the waves, and now that we hit kind of this AI wave, but I think is going to be the biggest of those other three that I've talked about. It's going to just revolutionize almost anything we can imagine. Um, so I think we're at the super early days of that. And we all watched how digital affected the world and how digital adoption and how that progressed. Companies and boards knew that they needed to have a digital strategy and knew they needed to have somebody on board to be able to articulate and serve as a translator between the developers and the business side. We had the same thing when social media came along. We had the same thing, as the internet comes along. Now that we have AI, I really think we're in that same spot. Everybody uses the term. I think, a much smaller fraction of the people that use the term AI actually understand what it means, um, or understand, what it's going to take to have organizations, really get everything out of this technology that it can do. In my experience, the organizational design or things that you do with people in your organization are far more important than the actual technology tool you purchase or bring on. So I think we're, at the beginning of a 10 or 20-year arc where all of that stuff will get learned, implemented, done, and people that do it better and earlier will clearly win the same advantages that people that did digital or social or the internet earlier. Um, so that's kind of how I see that technology progressing.
Yeah, you made an interesting comment, which really thought me think about had me think about the digital divide a little bit differently, right? So since the smartphone is the great equalizer, right? A lot of folks, because to some extent the cell networks, because they fractionalize the cost of the phone or finance the phone, right? They're removing some of that headwind to somebody in a particular socioeconomic area from getting that smartphone. They may not get the top of the line iPhone necessarily, but then you've got different tiers and you've got Android devices. And so, from a great equalizer perspective, that's super powerful, right? And transformative. And now I'm starting to think about, okay, the different tiers of AI and how that may actually recreate a little bit of a digital divide, right? Because even though they've got a very powerful small computer in their hand, right, they may only use an ad-supported free version of AI, which may be amazingly powerful
Mhm.
comparatively speaking to where they were a year ago or a year from now to where they are now, right? But then there's going to be different grades of AI, right, that different individuals and or corporate entities have access to. So, do you feel like we'll go through sort of an interesting evolution there, where it's like AI for all, right? That's potentially ad supported and it hits every socioeconomic layer or strata, and then sort of the premium level, sort of VIP level AI that only the wealthy or the corporations can afford.
So I actually have deeper concerns than that. And here's
Wow. Okay.
here, here's how I see it, right? So um, I think we sometimes forget. So if we look at just look at the United States, Only about a third of the population has a college degree. Two-thirds do not. So then you got to let that sink in for a minute. The average Google query is 3 words or less. The average ChatGPT query is 32 words. Do we really think that, again, and whether you're college educated or not has nothing to do with how smart you are,
Of course.
but it probably does have something to say with how comfortable you are at writing, right? It's hard to get through college without having to write papers, right? You've been forced to write a certain amount. But those that haven't have not. Do we
Hmm.
really think that two-thirds of the population is comfortable writing 32-word queries? Are they going to be able to understand prompt engineering? I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the amount of time and effort that people like you and I spend trying to learn how to prompt to get the maximum out of these things. Is that really going to be accessible to the average everyday person? So, we actually wanted to try to answer this question. So, using post-purchase surveys, we for the last 6+ months have been asking people, do you use ChatGPT from our customer base?
Right.
And we've been running at about 25%, so 1 in 4. Okay, now that's, if you listen to the popular press and the kinds of conferences that you and I go to, you'd swear it's 100%, right? Everybody uses AI, and AI is going to steamroll traditional search and whatever. It's going to completely take over. I don't see any evidence for that. It's 1 in 4 in 6 months. It hasn't really moved. I think we may be losing the amount of sophistication it takes to use the current LLMs is beyond the average person.
Hmm.
So this is a tool for the elites that the elites are going to use more and more to get more and more advantage. And the people that don't have that kind of education, IQ, sophistication are going to be left behind. Now, maybe, right, as we progress a little more and it becomes more voice-based, and maybe the prompts don't need to be quite as sophisticated as it learns more, we'll get to a point where it's more accessible. But we're nowhere close to that now. So when I hear all the buzz in this business about agentic commerce, I don't know what they're looking at. Okay. Because that person that doesn't understand AI can't do a query of that length. Again, we sell to real America. If 1 in 4 have ever even used the tool, do we really think they're going to turn over their credit card to some AI agent to let it go shop on their behalf? I just don't see it anytime soon.
That's a really great point. So maybe it's the ultra luxury travel segment that has to worry about it, but not, discount travel.
I mean, look, and I'll give you one more kind of take on the whole agentic piece. So let's say, you've had a cleaning person that's cleaned for you for the last 10 years, right? They're practically a member of your family. They're in your home every week, every 2 weeks, right? They go through all your stuff, right? You trust them, right? Because you have them in your house. When they ask you for cleaning supplies, do you just hand them your credit card and tell them to go to the store and bring the card back? Okay. Or do you take the list and go buy it and bring them back the products? Okay. Nobody hands their cleaning person their credit card. Yet, we're somehow going to hand an AI agent our credit card and let it go run wild on our behalf. Again, I struggle to see where kind of from a human behavior standpoint, we are there and that we have that comfort. If you look at any of the public polling on what their attitudes are towards AI, right, it's pretty hostile.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, the elites that use it, we all love it. Okay. But to the general world, they distrust it. Again, I just don't see how we're getting to that stage where we're handing it payment data and we're going to let it go off and do its thing on its own.
That's a great point of view. I'd love to pivot back to your, activities in digitizing companies,
Yeah.
because I've heard a lot about PE firms almost unanimously when I talk to them have this new thesis, right? That not all of them, but a lot of them that already were buying sort of companies to implement particular playbooks to digitize them in the previous way of doing the digital transformation, and now sort of reapproaching that from an AI transformation perspective, right? So they're amassing war chests to go out and buy these companies and completely remake the HR footprint, saying, "Oh
Yeah.
well, we can operate this on 40% less people in this department, 65% less people in this department. And okay, this other department still needs 90%, right? Because there's not that many efficiency gains with AI. Do you see that as a reasonable, thesis for these PE firms that are going to go in and try to take digital transformation to an entirely new level by applying AI?
So again, I see absolutely no evidence for this at all. Zero. So every experiment, I bucket. So over the last couple of years, for all the AI experiments that we've run, they fall into two essential buckets. The first bucket is essentially we're trying to build a robot to replace a person, right? Can I build an AI robot to do what a human does so that I can reduce human headcount? The second bucket is can I use AI to augment what people do to give them superhuman capabilities?
Right.
Every experiment we've run in the first bucket, right, where we're trying to replace people, have failed and failed miserably. Can't even get close. And the ones that we use to augment people have been huge successes. I'll give you an example of the first one, right? So there's a ton of firms out there saying, hey, you can reduce your headcount in customer service by using a voice AI agent. They sound natural. People won't be able to tell the difference. Our data shows that we can answer 40% of calls to completion, right? So, and again, where's my package? How do I do a return? Like these basic things, it makes sense, right? You think the AI should be able to do that. So we've run that experiment. But I've got 12 years of human customer service rep data, in the background. And we run the experiment, and the AI vendor comes back and says, look at all these tickets we finished to completion. And then I look at my human operators and look at the number of hours that they put in, plus the number of cases they've touched. It's barely moved, right? If I had showed you the data, before and after, you'd have no idea there was any automation put in place whatsoever, right? And the only thing I'm left to figure out, not that we could definitively prove it, is that the customer calls in, they weren't happy with what they got from the AI agent, but didn't know how to get to a human operator. So essentially, stopped the call. The AI took that as, okay, we successfully completed that one. And because they didn't see the customer when they came back through, they didn't count it as a non-completed transaction. That's the kind of stuff that we see. I'll give you one more data point. So KPMG does a survey, does a CEO survey, I forget how many times a year. So they asked 500 CEOs, would you, because due to AI, are you going to increase your headcount, decrease your headcount, or keep it the same? Only 10% said decrease their headcount. Only 10 out of 100, right? It was, 45, I think, was increase and 55 was keep the same. Again, this narrative that some of the heads of the AI companies are pushing in terms of these massive job disruptions, I don't know if they're doing it to pump, their stock or their IPO. Again, I'm struggling to see any real world examples where that has actually, come about. We've tried it to, again, I'm in the fast fashion space. I launch 1,500 SKUs a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It's a huge effort. I've got a PIM with 5, 6 years worth of detailed product data with pictures and everything else. Should be plenty of data to train an AI in terms of, okay, the next new item that comes in that they can, it can get 70, 80% of it done, but it can't do it all. And by
Yeah.
the time then I put a human to review everything it's done and fill in the gaps that it hasn't done, I'm really at the same spot. Maybe I get a 10 or 20% productivity improvement, but not enough to be able to, right, not reducing headcount. Maybe they can do a few more products. And by the time I pay for the AI, I'm in the hole. So I don't know. I don't worry about the job apocalypse that many people in the popular press do. I would push people for more direct examples of show me where you reduced people, how, and how did you measure that?
Yeah. I would say I haven't done any people reductions, but on the web de web development and other coding side of things, I've dramatically increased productivity.
I mean,
There's
Kevin, like to me, like coding is the one area that I think everybody agrees that AI is spectacular at,
yeah,
right? It produces code like crazy.
yeah.
Yet most organizations that use it hire more developers. So
No,
why?
we want to build more things
There we
faster,
go.
right?
You're right. They're far more productive, but it's not letting us reduce headcount in the one area that can actually do something,
Yeah,
better than a person. It still takes a pretty talented engineer to prompt it to get it to build the right thing, right? It doesn't just build it on its own out of thin air. You
yeah.
do have to prompt it and guide it correctly. So again, I think it's a great augmentation piece, but it's not a replacement.
So let's think through, how would you advise companies, because they clearly can't ignore AI altogether, right?
Right.
And they're not going to
Definitely not.
see potentially the level of transformation being promised by the AI companies with regards to running the company on half the headcount, right? So, you know, for the folks who maybe are leaning towards it's not ready or I'll ignore it for now, what advice do you give them as through creating experiments and sandboxes and trying things?
So let's go back to the spreadsheet example, right? I mean, spreadsheets didn't eliminate accountants or financial analysts, right? I think we got more analysts now than we did before. And people who embraced and learned that technology earlier clearly benefited both their organizations and their own careers. So this is not a time to sit on the AI sidelines at all. You should dive in head and feet, and you want to learn it, you want to play with it, you want to experiment with it. I would think about it more like spreadsheets, right? Organizations were far more efficient and able to get more done and gained real competitive advantage over being able to implement that technology. I think AI is that times 10.
So, is there anything we didn't cover today that you think senior level management should be thinking about this upcoming year as it relates to the digital footprint overall and AI?
I mean, look, I think the big thing is as we kind of embark on this journey is I think there's a lot to learn from the last couple pieces of technology that we as organizations and businesses had to absorb and kind of master. Um, this isn't just a 0 and 1 problem, right? I mean, this is make sure you're looking how your organization is designed, how this new tech is going to fit into that design. How are you going to incentivize your people differently? How are you going to measure things differently? To really get the most out of AI, this is a complete redesign of almost everything you do. There was a book that I always loved that talked about this information processing theory of organizations. So think about an organization as a bunch of nodes where information and decisions happen all along that tree. So how do you deploy computing resources at different parts of that tree to smooth that journey, and to improve the quality of those decisions? AI is going to completely upend how we do those designs, but that is a design problem.
Hmm.
Like think about the architecture, right? AI is great when you expertly tell it what to do and you expertly oversee it. It is not an easy button, right? It's not the Staples easy button. You really do have to guide it, interact with it, push it. It's not automatic. So I think businesses and organizations want to think through those people and those incentive structures. That's what it's going to take to be successful, but the time to start is now. The longer they wait, as we've learned through every one of these technology waves, the longer you wait, you never catch up. So the people that go early seem to have a permanent advantage that never disappears. This is not a time to be sitting and waiting.
All right, well, I guess there's a bunch of people who are saying I'll be the fast follower, but your advice to them is maybe you don't want to wait too long to be the fast follower.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, that's an excellent point. Thanks so much, David, for sharing your wisdom with myself and with the viewers and listeners. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate being here.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.